Chapter 10, Section 2, Conditions of the Working Class. Americans have long cherished the ideal of equality. Unlike European countries, the United States has never had monarchs or noble families who held economic and political power, just because they're part of an upper class. In the Gilded Age, however, a class system started to emerge in the United States. That is, society began to divide into unequal groups based on wealth and power. In 1879, the economist Henry George described this change as an immense wedge being forced through society. Those who are above the point of separation are elevated, but those who are not below are crushed down. The people being crushed belong to the working class. Many workers labored under terrible conditions. The working class included men, women, and children. They provided the skill and muscle that helped push American productivity to new heights and made employers rich. Yet these same employers often treated their workers, their human resources, as if they were merely parts of the machinery. Industrial workers had an exhausting schedule. They typically worked 6 days a week for 10 or more hours a day. For their efforts, workers earned about $1 a day. The work itself was repetitive and boring. Unlike farming or craft work, in which a worker did a variety of tasks, the factory system relied on a division of labor. This meant that production was divided into separate tasks, each with one task assigned to each worker. Factory owners designed the system this way for the sake of efficiency. Workers often performed their tasks in hazardous environments. A priest described a steel plant as the slaughterhouse. They kill them there every day. Whirling shafts, slippery floors, spinning blades, and molten steel all had the potential to injure or kill. Unlike today, worker safety was not a major concern. Workers were not given helmets or safety glasses, and those who were hurt or disabled received little or no financial compensation for their injuries. Factory owners believed that paying wages fulfilled their obligation to workers. Industrial processing often created toxic gases and dust. Workers in textile mills, for example, inhaled cotton dust all day. Worse yet was the situation of coal miners. Mary Harris, Mother Jones, a labor activist, described the wretched work that miners did. Their lungs breathe coal dust, she wrote, and coal dust grinds itself into the skin, never to be removed. Textile workers and miners suffered from lung diseases. Workers in cramped, unventilated sweatshops faced the constant threat of contagious diseases, such as tuberculosis. A sweatshop is a small factory where employees work long hours under poor conditions for low wages. Laborers put up with such adversity or hardship because they could lose their jobs if they protested. With immigrants pouring into the country, employers had little trouble replacing a complaining worker. Widespread child labor. Children worked in industry for two main reasons. First, even with both parents employed, a typical family could barely survive. The child's wages, though meager, made a crucial difference. Secondly, children earned less than adults, so factory owners were happy to employ them. At the same time, children were expected to do the same amount of work as their parents. Throughout the 1800s, critics voiced concerns about child labor. Some states enacted laws setting a minimum age for workers, often 14 or 15 years. However, these laws led to little change. Where child labor laws existed, companies often ignored them, and states often failed to enforce them. As a result, 6-year-olds worked in Georgia's cotton mills, and boys as young as 8 worked in the coal mines of Pennsylvania. In 1907, poet Edwin Markham described a typical street scene in New York's garment district. Nearly any hour on the east side of New York City, you can see them, pallid boy or spindling girl, their faces dulled, their backs bent under a heavy load of garments piled on head and shoulders. Child workers experienced some of the most dangerous working conditions. Because they were small, they could squeeze inside running machines to make repairs. Young miners driving mules through tunnels risked being crushed by loads of coal. In January 1876, a Pennsylvania newspaper noted, "During the past week, nearly 1 boy a day has been killed in the mines." Unsanitary living conditions. When their shifts finally ended, worn-out industrial workers headed home. For most, however, home offered little comfort. The great mass of workers, especially immigrants, lived in slums, heavily populated parts of a city marked by filth and squalor. Jane Addams, a social reformer, described a typical slum in Chicago. The streets are inexpressibly dirty, the number of schools inadequate, a sanitary legislation unenforced, the street lighting bad, the paving miserable and altogether lacking in the alleys and smaller streets, and the stables foul beyond description. Jane Addams, 20 Years at Hull House, 1910. In the slums, workers lived in tenements, run-down apartment buildings of 4 to 6 stories, usually housing 4 families on each floor. A New York commission noted that these families cook, eat, and sleep in the same room, men, women, and children together. Disease flourished in such cramped and often airless quarters, and fire was an ever-present danger.